That's what's at stake here. Not choice, responsibility.
I was touching up stuff.
You're touching up stuff?
I'm not gonna answer that.
So obviously we're right on the cusp of No Way Home right now. Everyone is pretty much buzzing for it, me included. Also terrified. I mean, especially also now with Kingpin basically confirmed back in Hawkeye. I'm terrified of the way characters could be handled, including the two inevitable Spider-Man, I think, in No Way Home. If Tobey and Andrew are back, terrified they'll be forced into some MCU character shit instead of just their own natural characters, but nonetheless incredibly excited. I wanted to make a video on Spider-Man generally. I thought about talking about Tom Holland's Spider-Man, because I have lots of opinions. Generally I like him, and I really enjoyed both movies, but I do have my problems with them. Basically, I only really have good things to say about the Raimi trilogy. Even though I was a fucking kid when they came out, I grew up with the DVDs on telly, so I still have crazy nostalgia, and maybe that is a part of it, but I genuinely think they're fucking amazing movies themselves. And then The Amazing Spider-Man kind of gets left in between a little bit. The second one, I have obviously made a video.
Now it's time for me to light my candles.
Yeah. These two movies have lots of different opinions from lots of different fans. I think my opinions on that movie were made clear in the intro itself, and I mostly feel the same. However, the first movie is different in almost every way, and I feel like despite this movie not being as good as any of the Raimi trilogy, including the third one,
Are you serious?
and probably not as good as Tom Holland's movies either, I still think this movie deserves appreciation, and I still actually enjoy it and think the positives outweigh the negatives. But before we go any further, if you do enjoy this video, please leave a like, it'd be much appreciated, and subscribe if you want to see more content. It goes a long way, and it only takes a second to do either. And if you end up not enjoying my videos, you can always change your mind later. So The Amazing Spider-Man is basically the Batman Begins of Spider-Man.
No, please don't say that.
It taking a darker approach, and for a large chunk, I think that provides a genuinely unique take on the webhead, on all the characters, and one that I actually enjoy and look back and appreciate much more now than I did the first time I saw this movie. I've only seen these two movies from Mark Webb. I'm not actually sure. I know he did 500 Days of Summer, and I know that's meant to be pretty good, but from what I gather, Mark Webb is someone who likes to work on character very much, and I think that's what he tried to do here, and I see that without a doubt myself. Our first sequence with Peter in school, where we see him with the skateboard and he encounters Flash again outside, and he takes a photo of Gwen, and all of that whole scene, we learn so much about Peter straight away, so much about this really unique version of Peter Parker, and I think even if you do hate these movies, I think you have to agree that it's a different take, for better or for worse. And I think it is unique. But that first scene sets the tone as well. Or I say first scene, obviously there is the scene of him as a child just before. Yeah, that first scene as him as the Peter we know sets the tone really well, I think. I think it's a pretty good start. I mean, he's a realistic teenager. I mean, what can I say? He's still mostly nerdy. He is cooler. You know, he skateboards, he does his hair, he's hot, you know. Generally, he's much more of a realistic teenager, even as a nerd, you know, and that's what this movie's trying to do, trying to Batman Begins this shit, trying to make it more real, and I actually think it works, surprisingly. I don't mind it. I think it's quite interesting. I like the realism it's going for. I like the characterization of Peter, for the most part, in this movie. I think it's written really well, and I think Andrew Garfield is really fucking good. There's a heavy focus on the problems of Peter Parker in this film, as in what's wrong with him, in particular his journey to becoming Spider-Man, and it's an unorthodox way of how he gets to that point, because he starts off as an asshole. I agree with J. Jonah Jameson.
He's a menace to the entire city!
When he first starts going out, he's driven by revenge for his uncle's death. For a decently long period, that is utterly intentional, I think. It's the mix of that dinner scene.
I think most people would say that he was providing a public service.
Most people would be wrong. Parthy was leading us to the people who run the entire operation. It's been a 6-month-long sting.
He's hunting down a bunch of criminals that all look the same, like he's got some sort of personal vendetta.
and saving the kid, that's when he becomes Spider-Man. We see Peter hesitate to chase the lizard instead of saving the kid, but he saves the kid, and that's when he becomes Spider-Man.
Who are you? Spider-Man.
A criminal!
And that's something I really appreciate in this film. That's when Stacy's words have set in stone in his head. The anger that drove him came at a cost, then came at a big consequence at the end of the movie. I think we could have done with a scene that probably has Peter battling with it, where we see a bit more clearly. But I think, myself, watching this movie a few times, I think the dinner scene does enough, and then saving the kid right after with that line and the piece of music, I think it presents it well enough, just enough for a lot of people to understand. But again, it's probably missing a few bits here and there, which is probably what ruins it for so many people. But for me, I think the dinner scene in particular, talking to Captain Stacy and what he says, and you see the realization, shit, he has fucked up here.
If I wanted the car thief off the street, he'd already be off the street.
So why wasn't he then?
He was leading us to the people who run the entire operation.
Do you ever look at someone and wonder what is going on inside their head?
Oh, no! No!
And with that, we can talk about the movie's relationships, which I think is one of the strongest points as well. I think they're really well done in this movie, and that goes alongside with the character stuff I was talking about, of course. Mark Webb seems utterly interested in the relationships of these larger-than-life characters. There's more of a relationship built with Uncle Ben in this movie, and I really like it. I really like this Uncle Ben. I think Sheen performs the role really, really well. Different to the Raimi Uncle Ben. Again, a more real one, a more fatherly role to these two in this movie. That's not saying I prefer it, I don't think I do in honesty, but the first Spider-Man movie actually captures the emotion perfectly. The way they do it in this film is different and gets a pretty good result nonetheless. And the moment where Ben dies, it is emotional and it's really well executed, and that is why I feel like it's clear that, yeah, when he starts going out, he's out for blood. Genuinely, the relationship built up with Ben beforehand is, I think, what keeps me from turning fully against Peter, you know, because I understand it's grief. I mean, yeah, I know it's not like Spider-Man to start a fucking revenge plot, but I like this take. It's unique, it's different, and I totally understand why people don't like it, but for me, I think it's executed pretty well. And then with Gwen as well, in terms of relationships, the way it moves forward between those two is very quick, and I admit that, but it still feels real, and I still prefer it to Peter and MJ in the new movies. I mean, they have chemistry, not really anything else to it, but everyone likes their relationship in these two movies, Peter and Gwen. I don't really need to talk about it, but I'm going to anyway. I care about both of them. Gwen, it takes a little bit for her to get a bit of a character, but Emma Stone does really well. Yeah, those two together and those two as individuals are probably the most consistent thing across these movies, both of them. And I didn't really say in my video before on the second movie, but when Gwen dies, it's actually one of the best scenes in both of these movies. That sounds quite dark, okay. Hang on. Not the fact she dies, I'm not there like cheering. It's really emotional, and Garfield's performance in that scene is probably maybe the best piece of acting a Spider-Man actor has done.
Stay with me, stay with me. Stay with me, stay with me. No, please, please.
That might be a hot take, but that moment in that movie, it's definitely the best scene in the movie for me, and it actually has a lot of weight. The movie is shit, I hate it, but that scene is great. And I mean, obviously the relationship all starts in this movie, the guilt from Captain Stacy, it's all set up here and it's set up really well. And what I was saying about Mark Webb wanting to focus on these relationships with these people, it doesn't feel like something Sony were interested in, which is upsetting to say the least. And like I say, Peter, I feel as a character is actually really good, and I actually think Gwen is mostly really good as well, actually. I don't think she's as good, but I think the thing that works is the conversation she has with Peter after he encounters the lizard. As she has worried her whole life about her dad, and now she's got someone else, and she seems kind of lost. And obviously that all leads to the end of that second movie. But yeah, and again, the chemistry and the performance from Emma Stone I think really carries it. I don't think the writing's too amazing for Gwen in this movie, I have to admit. I still actually care about her. I probably wouldn't have felt so much emotion if she died like at the end of this film, the second film did have a bit to do. I care about their relationship more than I care about Gwen, if that makes sense. Even Dr. Connors in this movie, until he's a lizard, his motivation's really good. Lizard City. What the fuck is that? I don't overly care for him as a person, as horrible as that sounds. Presumably Sony cut those great scenes with him. He has a kid, right? I believe it's in the deleted scenes. But his motivation to want to help people and want to help himself is something, at least. And they get a lot of Connor's character across without much exposition, really. And I don't know how they can cut out so much. And I believe it's even worse in the second movie. I can't really stress how good the characters are in this film, I think, and maybe that's a hot take, it probably is, but I really care about them, and it's realistic, and that's a big reason why. All the effects and action look great, I should say. The suit is a mix, in my opinion. A lot of people hate this suit. I don't at all. I think it's mostly good, but there are some scenes where it looks a bit iffy. But generally, I do like it. It's probably not as good as the second one, and I love the Raimi suit, so yeah. Probably prefer it to the Tom Holland suits. Mostly, design-wise, I prefer the Far From Home suit. The Holland suits are overdone with CGI, and it ruins them. Yeah, all the action and all the effects, like for the lizard himself and all the CGI, it's pretty good in this film, I think. However, despite a lot of good to say, and me appreciating this film heavily right now, it is far from an amazing movie, and a massive problem with these movies are the parents. I am more than fine with Peter having parent issues. That makes sense, especially in this interpretation, but having them so involved in Peter becoming Spider-Man is not okay. Or I actually have an issue come in with the second one, so I won't dive too deep into it here, but it takes so much time in this film, and they should have focused more on how it affected Peter, and I think that was more of the idea, but they just went down the secretive, like, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. route, and that doesn't work. It's not particularly interesting. They could have had, like, he looks in and finds Richard and didn't agree with the way they were going. They left, they refused to help Norman, and then they were assassinated by Oscorp. I'm not a big fan of the assassination by Oscorp stuff either. I don't know, just in this take, this world of Spider-Man, that secret, like, S.H.I.E.L.D. like Oscorp really doesn't work for me too much. I don't know. But in this film, it gets dropped halfway through with no mention, and then picked up with that hidden train in a subway in the second one. Oh, that second movie, it hurts just to think about it. But it's a horrible story, to be honest. Other than that, as I've mentioned, Peter learns that revenge isn't the way. I'm okay with that. I felt that the journey was represented well, and yes, I didn't take it like that at first. It took a few rewatches, but when you notice it, I feel like you can't unnotice it. And maybe you guys don't see it that way, and that's fine, because obviously a lot of people didn't. And maybe I'm just wishfully thinking, maybe they didn't intend it to be like this. I think you see the exact moment in Garfield's face in the dinner scene. But the problem is it's dropped without mention. The hunt for Ben's killer and the parent stuff is dropped without any mention from that scene onwards. Also, some of the editing choices, like the train scene, is a good scene, but it's edited really fucking weird. The pacing also isn't great in my opinion. We spend a long time studying Peter and then suddenly, bam, lizard people in the city, you know? Now I know I've just listed a decent amount of flaws I have with the film because this is a review and it's only fair and I want to talk about it, but I really feel like there are more positives. Despite preferring most of the other Spider-Man films, I think this is really underappreciated. I might prefer this to, I prefer some of this to some of Tom Holland's stuff without a doubt. I see this as a 50-50 Mark Webb and Sony film, whereas the sequel's probably about like a 2080. But I still think there's a lot to love and truly appreciate genuinely in this film. Despite my issues, I think there's a decent amount more good than bad, and I think there's a lot to really like. Despite my hatred for the sequel, I'm very glad that we got this movie, and I think it's genuinely good, and I'd recommend a rewatch. If you don't like it, that is completely fine, obviously, but I genuinely do find a lot to like in this first film. I think it's really underappreciated. Obviously, I don't think this is a perfect movie. I've just gone over most of the flaws I have with it, but I think a lot of the goods are really good, and I kind of love them, to be honest. It's true that I'm possibly riding the high on excitement for No Way Home, but nonetheless, I do actually like this film. I do actually think it's a good movie, and there is a potential best Spider-Man movie in here, but it's bogged down by the flaws, and thankfully, those flaws don't push it so far down to ruin the experience. I still watch and see it as a good movie and enjoy it. As the title of this video says, I appreciate this film, I appreciate this unique take, and I really like this movie. I think it's pretty good, and I hope Andrew Garfield is given the right treatment in No Way Home, provided he is in it. Thank you guys for watching, let me know what you do think of the movie in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care.